Hi everyone, and welcome back out to Harvest Hills Ranch. One of the things I reflect on sometimes is all the misconceptions that are in the food and nutrition industry, and also how the food industry takes advantage of these misunderstandings around nutrition and uses them against us to get us to buy things that otherwise we really wouldn't have any interest in. And so it turns out when we start talking about eggs, and more specifically egg yolks and the color of egg yolks, it turns out this conversation applies to that as well. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to delve into that and give you a few things to think about in regards to looking at egg yolk color, and hopefully maybe give you a different perspective on what it is actually egg yolk color is reflective of. So with that, I am Dr. Arland Hill. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. If you're new to the channel, hey, thanks for dropping by. I am passionate about all things nutrition, everything from what we do here at the farm to how that affects your family and to the food choices that you make on a daily basis. And that includes most likely eggs in your diet. Now, one of the things that we've been led to look at as a good indicator of egg quality is egg yolk color. And the translation here is that if the egg yolk color is a bright orange, then that means that I have a good quality egg that I'm consuming, and I should feel really good about that because I've made the best decision for my family. The question, however, is did you really, and how do you know, and how can you validate that? Well, what I want to do today is I want to challenge a few ideas about egg yolk color that seem to be commonly held beliefs, and actually talk about the natural cycles and natural rhythms in nature, animal nutrition, and how that influences this. And then also add in some comments about what's taking place in the food industry and how that can influence the decisions that you should be making about your egg choices as well, and where you're getting those from. So I have about 6 or 7 things that I'm going to delve into here. So let me start off with number one and just ask the question, when we look at egg yolk color, is that a direct correlation to the health of that animal? And in short, it's not. Keep in mind when we start talking about egg yolk color, truly all that's a translation of is going to be the carotenoids that are in the diet of that animal. Now, it might be an easy correlation to make that if the carotenoids in the diet are higher, that the overall general health of that animal should be higher as well. And while that does seem logical, it's not something that we should directly say is a definitive. It doesn't mean that those two are directly correlated with each other. So the reason that that's a point of interest is that those carotenoids may be something that are high in that diet, but other nutrients, other vitamins and minerals, so for example, other fat-soluble nutrients that are found in the yolk. Obviously, the yolk is fat, and so when we look at the fats, the proteins, the carbohydrate breakdown, and we see the fat content from an egg, that's predominantly coming from the yolk. But it doesn't definitively tell us anything about the other nutrients in there. It only speaks to the carotenoid level in there. And carotenoids are valuable. This is by no means an attempt to downplay the benefits of carotenoids, but as we now appreciate, nutrients don't act in isolation. Nutrients act synergistically with each other, and simply putting an overemphasis on one nutrient or one phytonutrient in the diet doesn't speak to the overall health of the animal, the product that they're producing, nor does it speak to what the overall health for us as humans is going to be either. So simply looking at that egg yolk color doesn't translate to animal health. I want to know some other things about that animal to understand what their ability to be able to provide me a nutrient-rich food is going to be. There's another part to this is my second point here, which is that when we look at egg yolk color is not speaking to seasonal variability in animal forage and in what that chicken is out there foraging on. And what I'm saying today could equally apply to duck eggs. It could apply to turkey eggs, guinea eggs, goose eggs. I mean, any animal that is out there foraging, free ranging, this conversation is going to be equally relevant to them as well. And so when we look at these variabilities in the season and how that's going to influence the yolk, we look at things like the natural rhythm of the season. So for example, if we look at the landscape in the spring and summer, we see that that landscape is much more vibrant. There's a lot more color out there, and inherently we would expect the carotenoid concentration to be much greater during these times of year. And then if you contrast that against the fall and against the winter, where we see that the landscape is a much more let me use the word bland coloration, if you will, where we see predominantly browns because plants have gone dormant, or in the northern states we see white because of ice and snow. If those are our landscapes and it's not as colorful, the carotenoid concentrations are not going to be as high in those environments either. And therefore, if that animal is out foraging and free ranging, what it has available to it, whether it's through plants or whether it's through a reduction in insect activity at that time in the environment, those are all going to be things that are not going to be reflected in the concentration of that egg yolk color. And we know from research, from observation of researchers, that there is a drop in these carotenoids as we go through a change in the season. So you would anticipate inherently that there would not be as rich of a color in that egg yolk in the seasons where plants are more dormant and insects are less plentiful. So that's something to think about as well. A third point to look at here is that we're lumping all farms into the same category in terms of production here. We're comparing every single farm across every area against each other, and that's not a fair assessment either, because that's not how Mother Nature works. Landscapes in the Northwest don't look the same as landscapes down in the Southeast, and there's certainly variability at different times of the year that are all going to influence that egg yolk color. If you look at, for example, plants that are available at certain farms, I'm here in Southeast Texas, and if I look at the plants that are available in my landscape in the spring or in the fall, where we're at right now, and I compare that against the landscapes of even northern Texas farms, they're going to be different. And so depending on which farms and landscapes, even if they're managed correctly, there's going to be different availability of those carotenoids in the environment for those chickens to be able to take advantage of. And again, this is not just related to chickens. It could be ducks, guineas, or any other poultry or fowl that we're including into this conversation, or that's an egg layer. Those are all all these things that we're talking about that influence egg yolk color are going to influence those species as well. So not every farm is the same, and this is a problem because philosophically we have evolved into this model where everything has to be uniform, it has to be a consistent appearance, and by the way, guys, that is not how Mother Nature works. That's not how Mother Nature operates. Just go take a walk in the forest and you'll see that no two oak trees look the same, no two pine trees look the same. There's a diversity of species, multiple types of trees. And so this is just completely antagonistic to the way nature operates. So we can't compare farms against each other in this same context either. There's no consideration, this is point number 4 here, is that there's no consideration to the fatty acid status of the eggs and more specifically the egg yolk here if we're only paying attention to color. We can manipulate that fatty acid profile in that egg yolk to be more inflammatory or to be anti-inflammatory depending on what that animal is consuming. If that animal is consuming diets that are dominated by inflammatory fats, then you're not going to see the long-term benefits of those carotenoids, even if they're present, because to some degree those carotenoids are going to be used to offset that inflammatory response. So there's more to this whole nutritional conversation than simply looking at the carotenoids in that egg yolk. And one of the points here is fatty acid status. Do I have higher amounts of omega-3s? And sometimes we even see in the grocery store that there are egg brands that will be promoting that they're high omega-3 eggs. But again, it doesn't speak to the totality of what that animal was consuming and all the availability of nutrients. Again, it's a very myopic view of trying to improve one component of the nutritional profile in that food that we ultimately consume to improve our health. But again, what's happening is these are all buzzwords, whether it's omega-3s or carotenoids or orange egg yolks. These are all buzzwords that the industry has gained hold of and that farmers and producers are seeing what consumers are attempting to look for here, and they're starting to fall into the same game as well by hyperfixating on these concepts. Another one is that we don't talk about the variety in the animal's diet. So this is point 5. We know that the more variety there is in that diet of that animal, the more bugs there are in the landscape, the more plants there are in the landscape that those chickens or other poultry can peck at and pick at. They're going to accumulate a greater variety of compounds in their final product, in the eggs in this case. They're going to produce a greater variety of these compounds that ultimately have therapeutic value, what we sometimes call these secondary metabolites. Those are going to have a much greater ability to overall speak to improving your overall health, because again, they're not only looking at one aspect like carotenoids. I had much rather have an egg that has an extremely diverse profile of secondary metabolites in it versus an egg that's just hyper focused on improving the carotenoid concentration and that appears to have that orange yolk color to it. What else do we need to think about here? Well, we need to think about this idea of unnatural supplements. So this is point 6, and so let me talk about this a minute. Let me set the stage for this part of the conversation, which is when we look at the landscape and someone's managing their poultry correctly, they're truly free-ranging their birds, and those birds can go out and they can sample what they want. They have the ability to pick and peck and choose. Those animals are eating different things all the time. They're not constantly eating the same thing. And so that's how they're naturally accumulating, whether it's carotenoids or these other secondary metabolites with their health benefits. That's how they're accumulating those compounds. Well, what about when that animal doesn't have the ability to concentrate enough of those? What is taking place? Well, this is happening at the industry level, the food industry level on big ag scale. But this is also happening on smaller producer scale as well, where there's the inclusion of ingredients in the feeds that are being given to the poultry that are problematic. So, for example, if I look at, let me take two aspects of this. If I look at, for example, things like marigold and cayenne, if the predominance of those carotenoids are coming from marigold, I'm hyper fixating, or I'm hyper focusing on those carotenoids to give me that egg yolk color, and the marigold is the primary plant we're doing it with. Whereas if you compare that to how the animal would do this and how it would go out and select those carotenoids, it wouldn't just keep going back to the marigold plant. It would be going to numerous plants out in its landscape to be able to choose from, not solely one. That, however, in this portion at this point is actually not the biggest issue for me. The biggest issue in this is that these ingredients, and that's literally how they are added in, that come from vendors are not just marigold and cayenne. In fact, I have had personal experience with this, and you can check out my video where I specifically talked about ethoxyquin, which you'll be interested in this if that name doesn't resonate with you. But I specifically found ethoxyquin in a feed that showed up mistakenly at my farm. And it allowed me to start doing some research, but what I found out from this is that there was a toxic substance that is added as an antioxidant. It's a synthetic antioxidant. It's not a naturally occurring antioxidant, so don't get misled by this terminology of antioxidant. I think they do that intentionally to throw us off trail as well. However, this synthetic antioxidant is extremely toxic, and it is allowed to be included into animal feeds, and it is not something that we as humans should be consuming. And so check out that video. You'll see more about what I had to say about that. Point being on this is that whether you're looking for that or whether your producer's looking for that, when I started doing the homework on this, that was not actually something that the feed supplier knew about. And I was also told that other farms are specifically going out of their way to request this on a monthly basis on their feed delivery to make sure that those egg yolk colors are a specific color, because they know that that is what the average consumer, however, that's not you anymore. Now you're the educated consumer, but that is what the average consumer has been led to believe is a true indicator of egg quality. It's not, guys. These suppliers that are dependent on this, these producers that are dependent on this and adding it to the feed that the poultry, the chickens are consuming, they're inherently, if they're sourcing from a vendor that uses that toxic compound, the ethoxyquin, they're actually creating a toxic substance and you're consuming that without being aware of it. So here's my question for you on this after presenting those 6 points to you. One, have we been led to follow a false indicator? And at best, is this a limited indicator? I do think that that is a conclusion that we can draw from the points that I've shared with you today. Ultimately, if our attempt is to look at the natural landscape, to watch the animal and to understand that animal in its natural landscape and ultimately how that animal would function in that landscape, and then when the time comes that we obtain a product that animal produces or we harvest that animal, does that ultimately translate into the nutritional dense product, the product that is high in vitamins, high in minerals, high in metabolites? I haven't even talked in this video about a substance called choline, which is extremely important in that egg yolks are an excellent source of, and that helps with forming a compound in our brain, in our nervous system. I shouldn't just say the brain because it's bigger than that. It's related to our muscles and other aspects of our nervous tissue, but it controls our muscle contraction. It controls our brain speed. I didn't speak anything about that. And when you're solely looking at that egg yolk color, guys, you have no idea what the choline status in that egg is. I want adequate levels of choline in my egg, and that's going to come from that animal going out and eating bugs in its environment. That's going to translate into a higher choline profile. So think twice when you're looking simply at egg yolk color as a definitive indicator. What do you as the consumer need to do? Well, here's what you as the consumer need to do. You need to go find out where your eggs are coming from. You need to visit a local farm. You need to see how they're raising their animals. They need to be able to show you that those animals have a diverse forage. Does it change during the seasons? Yes, it changes during the season. If that egg yolk color is not showing some variability throughout the seasons, you need to be asking questions. So have a conversation with your local farmer. And this is another reason when we start talking about buying local and getting to know the person that's producing your food, this is just simply another reason that you should be doing that. When you start trying to trace this or start trying to find transparency in the conventional food model, good luck. That's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to get into the details of anything I've talked about in this video with you. So you can do that if you have a local person you can connect with. Hey, if you're looking for any grass-fed and finished beef, if you're looking for pastured poultry, if you're looking for food products that are raised with the concepts that I've talked about in this video as well as my other videos, go to harvesthillsranch.com. We're down in Southeast Texas. We do ship currently into Texas and Louisiana, and so we'd love to be able to help you and support your family. If you are interested in any of the work that I do in my practice and understanding how I support patients and implement some of the same principles that I've talked about from the animal nutrition side into the human nutrition arena and how we improve patients' health, go to drarlandhill.com and you can find out more about that. Until next time, guys, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to join, and I look forward to seeing you in the very near future. Take care.